Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Behind Frenemy Lines, where we bring on an opposition supporter to talk about the big game coming up this week. And we've obviously got North Melbourne this week in a huge clash, it's actually got a bit more meaning behind it than maybe what we all thought it would have a few weeks ago. But we're lucky enough to be joined tonight by Marnie from KangaTV. Marnie, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problems at all. It's a big game for both of our clubs this week. And I did watch your preview today, and I tend to agree when you spoke about the pressures of this game probably feeling a lot greater than even what maybe round one did for North Melbourne, because I also agree that North Melbourne have been probably playing a lot better than us in recent weeks and we've just not been able to secure the win. But how are you feeling heading into this? You've just had a huge draw against Brisbane. You must be feeling pretty good about yourselves in some way.
Yeah, definitely feeling better in the last few weeks. I don't know if good is the best way to describe it. I've always been known for not believing in honourable losses, and I think if you are talking about honourable losses and, being proud that you drew against Brisbane, you're kind of taking away from the fact that this sport is about winning at the end of the day. And I understand we're a team that we're in a rebuilding phase, as is Richmond, and you have to take the wins where you can get them that aren't necessarily the 4 points. But sitting here, I feel like we could have won the last 3 games.
Yeah.
And in the context of the game, forget who we're playing, forget, where they are on the ladder. Like, we absolutely were in each of those games right up until the very end. And it does, while I'm proud of the effort, absolutely, it doesn't overshadow the overwhelming feeling of dissatisfaction that we haven't walked away with the 4 points at least once, if not twice or 3 times.
It's one of those weird things, isn't it? Because it's such a results-driven industry. And I know you mentioned about the honourable losses. It's weird because I get it from your point of view, because I do think North Melbourne are definitely 3 or 4 years more progressed in their rebuild than what we are. So that's probably where it's not as acceptable. We're probably a bit more open to an honourable loss in our state of football at the moment. But what's your assessment of the Kangaroos season been so far, I suppose, versus the expectations of what you were maybe thinking pre-season?
Definitely didn't think we would have only won 1 game to this point of the season. I definitely would have thought that we would have won a couple of extra games. And I do think that patch between rounds 4 to 6 really set us back. So we started the season really well. We had a pretty narrow loss to the Bulldogs, which on the day we sort of felt like maybe we were a bit hard done by and we maybe should have come closer to them. But in hindsight, it was actually a really good performance, backed it up with a massive win against Melbourne. And it was the first time in a few years where we had beaten a side outside of Richmond and West Coast and Gold Coast. They were the only 3 teams we've been able to beat under Clarko, bar 1 game against Fremantle. So it was really nice to have that kind of breakthrough win. But then in the weeks that followed, like we, fell to Adelaide, fell to Sydney pretty badly. We came close to the Suns and then they blew us out of the water in 5 minutes. And then obviously the loss against Carlton on Good Friday was just like panic stations. So I feel like after that game against Carlton, where we should have probably been looking to start notching up wins by that point, if we hadn't already, it kind of set us back a few weeks, because then all we wanted was a response. And we've had a response in the last 3 weeks. We haven't been able to get the wins, as I said. So, excuse me. It's been frustrating. But I do think we're on the edge of turning, and whether we can actually translate that into 4 points or not starting this weekend is the next step for me.
Yeah, it's the pressure is mounting. If you had to give it a scale of 1 to 10, how much pressure is on the team this week from maybe internally and externally? How much pressure is on the club to get 4 points this week? Because really, all things being equal, you should probably be able to beat us by about 20 or 30 points plus if you're playing to the best of your abilities.
It's a 10. Like, there is no doubt in my mind this is our biggest game of the year so far. And I think No, sorry, you go.
I was going to say, I jokingly during the week sort of said it was both teams' grand final in a lot of way, where both teams are going to go into this game believing they're a genuine chance of winning, maybe more so Kangaroos than Richmond. So similar to our West Coast game last week, I do think it's going to be a really hot and fierce contest from the start, because I think both teams are going to be very willing at the contest.
I think the expectation on North in going into season 2025 is that we would be a lot more competitive. We would come away with, maybe 6 to 8 wins. That's not saying that we can't do that, but it's looking pretty hard for that to happen at this point, right? And then you look at Richmond's season and the expectation going in, it's sort of just like, will they even win a game? Like, give it a crack. And I kind of feel like we're crumbling under an expectation that we set on ourselves at the start of the year, whereas Richmond have played some really fun, really enjoyable, energetic footy at their best. And they've been able to come away with wins against Carlton, against the Suns, and then it was a pretty gritty win against West Coast last week, but you still were able to find a way to just hang on and get the job done. So I feel like because we've been so bad for so long, and I think we finally feel like the cannon's loaded and ready to go, everyone's just sitting here thinking, why is this not happening? And it's trying to find a good balance between patience and allowing it to build and to be what it's meant to be. So yeah, I just think it's this game for North. Like I said, I feel like we should have won a few more games than we have already at this point. And if we can't win on Sunday, I actually don't. It makes me feel sick thinking about what could happen if we don't.
I can imagine. Yeah. I tend to agree with you, though, that I think the wheel started to turn a bit for you. You obviously picked up Caleb Daniel, Jack Darling, Luke Parker amongst like some senior players in the off-season, which I actually really thought were really smart and clever recruits. I guess a byproduct of that is, though, they've still got to mesh into your system and find their groove within your team as well. And I reckon that's what's been maybe holding you back a little bit at the start. Not them as individuals, but just them not getting into the North Melbourne pattern of game style that Clarko wants everyone to play. And I think that'll start to come together as the year goes on. And maybe it'll be the start of it this week, unfortunately for us.
No, I do. I hope so. I'm so sorry. I really do hope that's the case.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yes, I do agree with you. I think each of them have had very different seasons. I think Luke Parker's been phenomenal. He's slotted in like he was, like he was always part of our puzzle. He'd been our top 3 and our best and fairest, I reckon, at this point of the season. He's been unreal. Jack Darling, I've loved what Jack Darling has done for our forward line as a whole. He's given us a lot more structure. He ripped Harriet Andrews apart in the last quarter last week and almost won the game off his own boot. The problem I have for Jack Darling is that we look a lot more dangerous when we have 2 key forwards, which makes Darling play second ruck when Sherry needs a bit of a chop out, but his tank isn't like what it used to be. So he definitely does tire a little bit when he is taken out of the forward line. And then he just looks so much more dangerous when he spends 100% of the time in the forward. So in the fourth quarter against Brisbane last week, 100% of game time, Jack Darling was in the forward line, 4 possessions for 4 scoring shots, 2 goals, 2 in the last quarter and 2 marks. Like, it's freakish performance, and that just shows capability. So I think he's been great for our forward line as a whole. I just would love to see him stay in the forward line permanently if we can find a way to make that happen. Caleb Daniel's probably been quite lackluster and underwhelming for me. I haven't loved what I've seen from him so far this season. I think part of that is probably the supply that he's getting. So he's used to kicking to the leads of a Bond or a Treloar or a Libba or Ed Richards, all of these guys. Whereas, we're quite stagnant. We don't have a lot of movement in our, especially if we've got the ball, in defense and we're trying to exit sort of a bit slower and maybe a bit more calculated than going for this like handball running sort of style. I don't think that we are doing him any favours, but I don't think he's doing himself any favours either. I am happy to stick with him for now, but I still need to see more to kind of justify what we gave up for him at this point.
Yeah, that's a fair enough call. He's got to fit in and play his role properly, doesn't he? No free passes these days.
No.
We'll bring up the changes quickly because I know the final sides won't be announced until tomorrow, but on our extended bench, we've got Jaden Short, Campbell Gray, and Jasper Alga. The Campbell Gray one is probably interesting for us. That might signal that maybe Ben Miller could be a little bit sore. I think he had a bit of a dodgy shoulder, so that could be something there. I'm super keen to see Jasper Alga play, who was one of the kids we drafted last year. He's had a pretty good body of work. He just missed out last week. I would have dropped Steely Green for him personally, but Yeah, and Jaden Short, well, I mean, the jury's out on him. He hasn't had a great 2 years, if we're being honest. So Sam Banks did a great job on the half-back line the other week, and it's actually really interesting that he's been named on the bench and not on the field, so he could be still subject to miss out. And then for the Kangaroos, you've got Zach Fisher, Will Dawson, and Will Phillips in for the extended bench. What are your thoughts on your inclusions?
Yeah, I think all good inclusions. I would be surprised if we made any changes. I don't think there's nothing to fix. And I'm very much a believer that we should keep a bit of consistency and continuity in the side where we can, just to allow them to gel together and find a bit of synergy, and hopefully that would lead to a win. I think that Will Dawson's a really interesting one. So he's a defender and he's played in defence. He's played a couple games, made his debut last year, played a couple games last year, but then has been playing a bit of time up forward in the VFL over the past few weeks and has been tearing it up. So I'd love to see him get a chance. The only person he would probably come in for would be Finbar, but I would give Finbar another game and then he'll probably be the one to make way for Paul Curtis when he's back from suspension the following week. The other two, like I said, while I haven't loved what Caleb Daniels brought so far this season, I can't see him being dropped. So I would think that Zach Fisher's the only replacement there that would make sense in my mind. And then Will Phillips, they may look to bring Will Phillips in for that extra defensive element to the midfield. We've got George Wardlaw there. We've got Parks, obviously, but Will Phillips is very much a lockdown tagger, very defensive midfielder.
Please don't do that. We struggle as it is. We don't need a tagger against us.
I mean, I think there is a spot for him, and I'd love to see him. And I think a lot of fans are quite frustrated at the way he's just being in and out of the side, especially with the tackling option that he offers. But looking at the side from last week, the only person I would probably think that we may look to drop would be Zane Dersma. If we did, he was pretty quiet last week. He wasn't great. But I don't know. My gut just tells me that we won't make any changes unless someone has to come out for a specific reason.
With Will Dawson, out of interest, is he tall?
Yeah, he's a key position.
Because I actually think, without knowing intimate details of North Melbourne's side, I think he could be a chance, because what I'd actually noted down, I actually think the one part of the ground we might be able to get on top of is our key position forward. So I've just written down some height comparisons. So Common's 199 centimetres, who'll probably be on Lynch, who's the same height, which is fine. Then you've got Toby Pink at 194, and we've got Jonty Fall at 195, not that much difference. And Aiden Core, 195, and Tom Sims is 199, and then McDonald, 189, on Lawler, 188. So some of them are even, but on the overall average, I did feel like that maybe we could stretch North Melbourne a little bit, and maybe that's why we've got Campbell Gray on standby as well, potentially. So there could be a little bit of cat and mouse happening in that space.
Yeah, possibly. I would say, I would say Toby Pink or Aiden Core would go to Tom Lynch, because Charlie Common's not a lockdown defender. So he's obviously got the height, but he's more of that intercepting defender. He might, but I would be surprised. I'd probably say Toby Pink would get the job on Tom Lynch. So our defenders do play a bit taller. So Aiden Core does play taller. And then Charlie usually just is sort of allowed to run and roam and kind of drop into holes where needed. So I'd be interested to see how they stack up. It would be unlikely in my mind that we would bring in a third key defender, quote unquote, because usually the structure has been Aiden Court, Charlie Comben, and then one of Toby Pink, Griffin Lowe, Callan Dawson. That's kind of where we look our strongest in defence. So I don't know if they would bring him in defence. If he was going to play Will Dawson, I think he would come in for Finbar and play forward as the third key forward.
And maybe you might flip the script a bit and try and stretch us, because we'll only have Bolter and Miller of note of actual height down forward. And I mean, Bolter's going to have his handful with Nick Larkey, who's one of the gun forwards of the competition. And Jack Darling has notoriously given us headaches even when at West Coast. Just one of those players that we just don't match up very well on. And he always seems to take his marks and kick his goals. So if he continues that form, then adding another tall down there could actually make things interesting for us, because Broad's not overly tall, Vlosten's not overly tall, and it would actually stop them from being able to do their intercept game. Luke Trainor's tall, but he's not very big, as in weight and muscle wise yet.
No, 100%. I think it's going to be an interesting clash. There are so many potentials in terms of like matchups, and also like how much of it is this like man on man, and then how much of it is actually relying on your zone to get it done as well. And then even in terms of general game and the way games go, I feel like Richmond start games very well and fade out, whereas we start slow and build. So I feel like the first half could be a real telling sign as to the way the rest of this game plays out, because I was at the game against the Suns over on Easter weekend, and the way Richmond held their nerve in the last quarter was very impressive. But at the same time, you feel like 5 more minutes of that game and the Suns probably would have been at the top of them.
We were under the pump massively, out on our feet. They were coming a million mile an hour. You're right. The start of our game has been better for the last 4 or 5 weeks. The problem is, though, it'll be good from like a territory point of view and even a pressure point of view, even against West Coast, but we're not putting the actual score on the scoreboard to create that pressure. So that's where teams can get back into it relatively easy. So, yeah, it's one thing to dominate the ball, but if we don't actually kick a score, then it'll, momentum swings happen in games all the time. So the Kangas will have their chance. And I think a big key for us to be any chance of winning, I think we do need to try and put score on the board early to create that bit of pressure, because you're already going to be feeling it potentially with just the magnitude of the game. If we can get a bit of a head start, it could maybe cause some issues and some headaches for the Kanga players. But if we don't, then it'll all count for nothing.
Because we're the same. Like last week against Brisbane kicked the first goal of the game in the first 30 seconds, but it was pretty much even for the rest of the quarter after that. We had big patches of that first quarter where we were really dominant, but we couldn't translate that into scoreboard pressure. So that's also been our biggest thing. There's been a few games this year we haven't actually played that badly in the first quarter. We just can't get a score on the board. I feel like, obviously we're two sides lingering towards the bottom of the ladder, so naturally it would be an entertaining contest heading into it, you would think, and naturally there would be an even matchup because of where we sit. So I'm very curious as to see how that looks on Sunday.
Does North Melbourne do what we do? They work extremely hard for a goal, and then the opposition just go bang, 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 reply. Does that happen a bit?
Yeah.
Which is extremely frustrating.
Yeah,
that's not fun.
Yeah. I feel like we have the same pain points. I feel like the biggest thing for Richmond is that the games at the MCG. We haven't won a game at the MCG since 2017.
Yeah.
Playing there often. Like we're playing there 3 times this year, which is a huge jackpot for us. We only usually play 1 game against the D's at the MCG a year, and we have for quite some time. So that's, we don't play the MCG badly per se, but we just haven't won there for quite a while. So that's definitely a big bonus for the Tigers heading into this for sure.
No, that is definitely. We'll take any small advantage we can get. Now, Harry Sheasel, based on the lineups we just looked at, has been named in the midfield, but has spent some time going to halfback as well, which I think he looks a lot more comfortable at. But I can definitely understand the need and the desire to have him as a midfielder. Where do you see Harry Sheasel playing his most damaging football?
It's so hard because there are so many players who are quite similar, and we're trying to fit, triangles into circles. I think Harry, we've got the luxury that he's such a good user of the footy, and he's so clean that he'll pretty much just slot in anywhere and do what he needs to do. I think to allow him to regain some confidence, I don't mind him playing off halfback. But with the inclusion of Riley Hardiman in there over the past couple of weeks, and Riley, I feel like, has completely transformed our back line as well. He's been unbelievable. I'd love to see Shees push up and try and have a bit more time in the midfield, and even pushing forward a little bit, just to get him more involved with the key play. Because you look at a game like last week, and we had George back in the midfield, which was epic, and we had Parks there, and LDU was very good against Brisbane as well. But you kind of feel like maybe if you had Shees forward of the ball, maybe he would have been able to impact and lift. And it's really hard when you've got guys like McKercher, who's sort of suffering with second-year blues. He's been okay, but hasn't been amazing. Fino Sullivan, I think, is still finding his feet at senior level. So there's definitely a few guys there who haven't been performing the way we need them to. And then you've got Shees, at halfback because of it. So I would love to see a way we can get him more involved, in the middle of the ground and forward of the ball. But I also don't have an issue if the side needs him to be at halfback, then so be it for now.
Yeah, bit of miss to fix it. Wardlaw is a big inclusion again. I know he obviously missed with a bit of an injury recently, but yeah, he's going to be an absolute gem. I know he's still very, very young, but he's a super footballer. And I think he actually complements your midfield really well. Just takes the workload off like an LDU and Sheasel just allows them to do their thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, George is, and this is, I guess, where the frustration with Will Phillips comes into it for North fans. So George missed the Essendon game with a corky. He came back last week, and he is a genuine two-way runner. Like, he is as good on the defense as he is on the attack. And that is something that Will Phillips doesn't offer. So it's not like Will Phillips is a scapegoat necessarily. I think we could find a way to play both of them. But in my mind, you look at someone like George, and he's as damaging on the offense as he is on the defense. And he's going to lay the hard tackle, but you also know he's going to win the ball in the middle of the ground in the guts if you need him to. So everyone loves George and everyone loves the energy, and you kind of feel like everyone sort of walks a little taller when George is lining up alongside them. So if we can find a way to manage his injuries, to the point where they're no longer a thought, the way we have with Charlie Comben over the past couple of years, that would be ideal, because I do agree with you. I do think he's going to be a star if he's not already.
Yeah. No, very, very good play. Every team needs a George Wardlaw for sure. We'll take a look at some key matchups now. I've put Sheasel down at halfback. I just think he might spend a bit more time there than midfield, but it can obviously change. And I think I would rather see Ryan Mansell go up against him than Seth Campbell. I just think this matchup would be interesting because Mansell's the type of player that would try and get under Sheasel's skin. I'm not sure how he copes with that type of player. And Mansell can also hurt the other way on the scoreboard and setting up goals as well. But I would love to see these two go head-to-head because it gives Mansell a bit of accountability too, because Sheasel is equally as damaging when he's streaming off the half-back line.
Yeah, Harry doesn't love a hard tag. He has had a couple of games in the past where he has struggled with it, but he's also just the ultimate professional. So I do feel like he will be creative where he can to try and still find ways to impact the game. If he's playing off halfback, obviously it's a bit of a different role for him. He's not necessarily the guy, but he's, an important part of the chain. And with Riley Hardiman, who I mentioned before, I think with Riley there supports him really well. So I think it'd be an interesting contest. But on the flip side, Harry doesn't love a hard tag. So if Mansell can find a way to annoy him and get under his skin, he could be in for an interesting afternoon.
Upon reflection, I kind of hope it doesn't happen because I've got Sheasel in my Supercoach draft team and I don't need him getting a low score. So maybe we'll scrap that one. The next one I've gone with is Bolter and Larkey, the two big boys going at it. I know they've had plenty of duels throughout their shortish career so far, but like I said before, Larkey I think is one of the better marking forwards of the competition, and on his day can kick a big score. And I'm really glad this isn't a night game because we wouldn't have Bolter for this, and we would be in a lot of trouble if it was just Ben Miller on Larkey. So I think this is going to be a big key battle for us, and it's going to take more than Bolter to stop him. It's going to be a team defense, which hasn't been our strong suit. But my other concern, secondary to the Bolter versus Larkey issue, is we've still got Zerha to worry about as well. But how do you see the two big boys facing off against each other?
Yeah, interesting. I think Suv's due for a big game. He's been a bit quiet the past few weeks. There was an article written about him on the AFL website that he's like one of the sharpest shooters in the competition, most accurate. At the time was the most accurate forward in the competition, and has pretty much gone missing since that article was written. So I'm gonna have to follow that up with AFL House. But he can just have a game, and once he gets on a roll, I think that's the best thing for him is he can kind of let his momentum build. You mentioned Zerha before, and that's the beauty of Jack Darling coming into this side is that without Jack Darling last year, Miller's going to Zerha. Paul Curtis is out in out suspended, and then it's kind of just Finbar Maley and Jacob Constanti in their 3rd and 9th game respectively, trying to make something happen in the forward line. Whereas Jack Darling's in the equation now, so he takes Miller, and the physicality of Jack Darling never leaves him. Might be a bit older and a bit slower, but he's still really physical, and he showed that last week. So that allows Zerha then, and Zerha's had a fair couple of weeks. He's probably been also quite underwhelming so far this season. Paul Curtis has really been the guy up forward, but Zerha was the one who started from the get-go last week, and so I'd back him in to do it again, especially if there isn't a strong matchup for him the way that you've got Larky and Darling covered.
Yeah, I always thought when I heard that you were getting Darling, I automatically just thought that that's going to be the best player to enhance Zerha's impact on a game, because he's going to end up with a 3rd defender now, which is crazy because he's such a powerful player and can literally win a game off his boot. So he does worry me, because I do feel like he gets the better of us at the best of times before Darling was at North Melbourne. And now we've got to, put someone else on him that's not a second defender. It could. And this is where Campbell Gray might have to come in potentially to try and help us out there. Hopper and Wardlaw, we have mentioned Wardlaw previously, but I just think just seeing 2 tough nuts going at it, fighting for contested footy, will be highly entertaining for everybody. And Hopper's probably the fittest that he's been in his career potentially, and having a wonderful season. But Wardlaw is definitely no slouch, and like you said before, he will be crunching in a million mile an hour, and it'll be a really good contest to watch.
The way I see this matchup going is, if you look at Hopper and you're looking at Wardlaw to take him, or if this is the matchup we're talking about hypothetically, then you've still got the likes of an LDU to worry about, or you've got the likes of a Tom Powell to worry about, or the likes of a Jai Simpkin to worry about as well. So this is where our midfield can be really dangerous. The flip side of that is, I don't think we've seen too many times this season where all of our midfielders play consistently well. For the example, LDU had a really good game and George Wardlaw had a really good game against Brisbane, whereas Tom Powell and Jai Simpkin started the game quite slow and then built into it as the game went on. Jai Simpkin was excellent in the second half, and so was Tom Powell. So that, again, it's like we, just as a side, it's the same thing with getting score on the board early. You've got to find a way to kind of get going when the game starts. So hopefully this works in our favour as well. And like I said, if Wardlaw, who does have the ability to run both ways, goes straight to Hopper, then you've got the likes of an LDU or a Simpkin or a Powell who are able to step in and step up.
Plenty of depth in the North Melbourne midfield. The last matchup I'll bring up is Nankervis versus Sherry, and this one worries me a little bit because Sherry is honestly, I would say, equal best ruckman in the competition and can comfortably sit alongside Max Gawn. He has shouldered the load for your ruck duties for a couple of years now and is an amazing player. Nankervis, I think, will compete okay against him. What I'm scared about is that I think Sherry can ruck for a lot longer than Nankervis. So when Nankervis is off the ground, we're going to be potentially throwing Tom Sims in his second game into ruck against Sherry, because I don't think Darling does a hell of a lot of ruck work. And I think that could cause some issues for us. But always fun to watch the 2 big ruckmen go at it.
Oh, 100%. I think with Sherry, it was so interesting. So we played Adelaide at Adelaide Oval in round 3, and we played Port Adelaide there again in round 7. And Sherry hurt himself in the early stages of that Adelaide game. And it felt like from that moment until we returned to Adelaide Oval 4 weeks later, X did have a little bit of a lull, but the way he's just transformed as a footballer over the past 18 months has just been phenomenal. I can put my hand up and say I had no faith in him ever becoming half as good as what he is now, let alone the player that he's become. But Goldie leaving at the end of 2023, it kind of felt like the predecessor pressure was alleviated and he could just step into his own and be his own player without having Goldie waiting in the wings. And it's been the best thing for him, and he's, turned into a real fan favorite. He's been phenomenal. And it's not just his endurance and his stamina, but it's also the way he can impact the ground and impact general play around the ground. He's really, really important in centre clearances. He often wins the clearances himself. He's tackling, he's marking. There's not much that he can't do. He's turned into that complete player the way that Goldie was. So while everyone loves and respects Nank and what he is able to do, I wonder if the endurance and the durability of Sherry at the moment will be too much for him.
I think that's the big difference. Actually, like all those things you just described, I think they're very identical players in how they play the game, with how physical they are and their work rate around the ground and things like that. I just think the age difference and the endurance difference is going to be where we might come undone a little bit. And that's where, Sherry will be able to take advantage, because, it truthfully scares me about Sims having to do the backup role. But I think when these two are both going at it, though, it's going to be a fascinating contest, and it's going to play a big part in how both midfields go respectively.
I think so too.
Well, with the matchups all said and done, what is your final tip, including margin, for this one? You don't have to be nice. If you think North Melbourne will win by 30 or 40 points, that's fine.
I have to tip North. I mean, I'm tipping North anyway, but it would be silly of me to go on an opposition podcast and not tip North. I don't actually do footy tipping because I always tip North.
Right, fair enough. Yeah.
So I don't really have much of a chance of doing well in tipping. I'm going to go with 4 goals. So last year when we beat Richmond, it was a 13-point margin. I felt like it was bigger at the time, but then looking at it during the week, it was only, the couple goals. I do think we've improved from where we were probably in that game. I think Richmond have as well, but I back us in that we are at least a 2 to 3 goal better side than what we were 9 months ago. So let's go with North by 4 goals.
That makes sense. I truthfully think that's probably how it will play out. But for the sake of being loyal, I'll say Tigers by 12. But I think it'll be one of those games where we'll fight it out pretty strongly in the first half. And I think if North can just hold it together for at least 2 quarters, they should be able to sort of pull away a little bit later on in the game and get the job done, because we just haven't got that 3.5, 4 quarter effort down pat just yet with how inexperienced we are. It is what it is, I guess. But I suppose before we go, the bigger piece to this puzzle is the draft pick that's attached to North Melbourne that sits with us currently, and how that all plays out too. I suppose, how do you feel about the trade number 1 and where the pick sits currently? What's your take on all that, and where with the number 2 pick?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I liked it at the time because it signified to me as a supporter that the club believes they're ready to go now. Like, we're not going to wait another 12 months. Like, this is the start of where things are turning. And that's definitely how I felt heading into the draft last year. So I didn't dislike it. Matt Whitlock will be a great player for North as well. And I hate that there's that added pressure on him for reasons out of his control. The only thing that makes me question it is that I believe the key position players in this year's draft are quite strong at the top end. And so we probably could have gone for a key position player with the pick that we were going to take into this year's draft. If we were going to go into because so many times in the last few years, we've just gone for best available, and now we've got a stack of midfielders, and there's a chance that a couple of them won't be there in a few years' time simply because there's no space for them. So from that perspective, if that's the plan, then I'm all for it. And like I said, at the time, it signified to me we're ready to go. But the flip side of it is I believe that there's some good key position players available at the top end of this year's draft, and maybe we could have held off to take one of them instead.
Yeah, I was a little bit confused at the time when you did it, but then upon sort of reflecting a little bit afterwards, at some point in time, clubs have to take a punt on themselves, and I think that's exactly what North did. They backed themselves into be better performing. I also felt that there was maybe the thought in the back of their minds that if LDU had have left, then the combo pick would have probably replenished what you lost anyway. But then you keep him, so it's a win anyway. You keep him, you win. If he goes, you get a pick that's high anyway. So I think you probably had your bets hedged there as well. But I don't think there's issues with clubs betting on themselves. I think you've got to show that kind of faith at some stage.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I believe we were trying to get another pick either late in the first or early in the second because we wanted to take both Whitlocks. I think that was always the plan. Right. But the draft was really strong and no one was really budging on draft night. And so I think they kind of got what they wanted at the very least, part of it. The hard part is that we traded our second round pick out for Caleb Daniels. So if we had held on to it, we probably could have had both brothers. But hey, I mean, it's a sliding doors moment, and hopefully it,
Yeah.
Back our way sometime soon.
Exactly right. Well, Marnie, thank you so much for jumping on tonight and chatting about the game this weekend. All the best for Sunday. Hopefully it's a great game for both teams. Hopefully we all get through unscathed and we can see a ripper contest.
Thanks for having me, Chris. And I'll leave you with one little nugget in my final bid to get your listeners on side. My favourite ever footballer that did not play for North is a Richmond player.
Who was it?
It was Daniel Jackson.
Yeah, okay. He's a ripping guy. We've had him on before. He is an absolute gentleman, and it pains me to see him in Adelaide.
The best, like one of the best people I've ever met in my whole life. And that just, it's more, I'm definitely known for loving niche players, and he definitely fits that category very well. But just like one of the best people you will ever meet, and made me just like love Richmond when he was there. So yeah, just
he's super smart. Wasn't blessed with skill, but he cracked in hard every week, and you're always going to get 110% with Daniel Jackson.
100%. And I've met him a few times, and and this is like, there'd be years between when we've seen each other. I met him the first time when I was 17, and then I met him a couple of times after that. And every time, no matter how long has been in between, he's remembered who I am, what I studied at uni, like what I was doing with my life, like just the best guy. And I couldn't come on a Richmond podcast and not talk about him. So
no, I appreciate that. That's good to hear.
There you go. So yeah,
because you hear so many stories go the other way, so it's always nice to hear the positive ones. That's a good way to finish off. I appreciate that, Marnie. Thank you so much again for your time, and all the best for Sunday.
Thank you. You too.